I never thought I'd wake up next to my high school bully, not in a million years, not even in my wildest, most chaotic dreams. Yet there she was, lying next to me, breathing softly, her bare shoulder peeking out from under my bedsheet like a silent confession. It should have been a nightmare. But it wasn't. It was worse because my heart didn't know how to hate her anymore. Her name was Samantha Blake, and in high school she made my life a living hell. Every insult, every shove in the hallway, every cruel smirk when I tripped or dropped my books, they all had her signature written all over them. I used to fantasize about the day she'd get what she deserved. But as I stared at her sleeping face that morning, framed by the soft sunlight spilling through my apartment blinds, I realized the universe had a twisted sense of humor. I, Lena Carter, the quiet nerd who used to hide in the library during lunch breaks, had slept with the girl who once made me cry in bathroom stalls. And I couldn't stop thinking about her lips. The night before had been a blur of whiskey, laughter that felt too easy, and memories we both pretended didn't hurt. It started at a reunion party, one of those awkward events where everyone pretends their lives turned out better than they actually did. Samantha had shown up in a sleek black dress, confidence dripping off her like perfume, and I had tried not to care. But she saw me, and when she smiled that same infuriating magnetic smile, it was like high school all over again. Except this time she wasn't mocking me. She walked right up, a drink in her hand, and said, "You look different." "Yeah," I said, forcing a smile. Not hiding in the library anymore. Her laugh was softer now, less sharp. "Good. I always hated that you hid." There was a moment, a pause where the music faded into the background, and her gaze lingered just a little too long. Maybe it was the alcohol. Maybe it was the nostalgia. Maybe it was both of us realizing how much time had changed us. But somehow the night ended with her at my apartment door, and then on my couch, and then, well, the rest is what I woke up to. When she finally stirred, blinking against the morning light, there was this small, fragile silence between us, like the air itself was waiting to see what we'd do next. "Morning," she said, her voice a little rough, a little human. I just stared. "Do you remember last night?" Her lips curved into a wry smile. "Do you want me to?" God, that arrogance. That familiar, infuriating smirk that used to make me want to scream. And yet now it just made me want to kiss her again. I hated that about her, how easily she could make my heart betray me. I tried to sound casual. "It was a mistake." "Was it?" she asked quietly. That question lingered like smoke between us. Over the next few days I tried to forget it happened. I buried myself in work, avoided her texts, deleted her name from my phone twice, and still found myself staring at the empty space on my couch where she'd laughed the night before. But fate, or maybe just bad timing, had other plans. A week later, she showed up at the coffee shop where I worked. "Hey Carter," she said, leaning against the counter like she owned the place. "Samantha," I said, trying to keep my tone even. "You here for coffee or to haunt me?" "Both." Her grin was maddening. I handed her the drink without another word. But as she reached for it, her fingers brushed mine, soft, deliberate. It sent a spark through me I couldn't explain. She looked at me, really looked, and for the first time I saw something in her eyes that didn't belong to the girl who used to mock me. Regret. "Why are you here?" I finally asked, voice low. She hesitated. "Because I can't stop thinking about you." I froze. It would have been easier if she'd said she wanted to apologize. Or that she'd been drunk. Or that she was just curious. But this raw honesty, it disarmed me. "Don't mess with me, Samantha," I said softly. She shook her head. "I'm not. I swear." There was something trembling in her voice, the same kind of trembling I'd heard in my own the morning after. The kind that comes when your walls start to crumble. She took a deep breath. "I was a terrible person to you in high school. I know that. I don't expect you to forgive me. But that night, it didn't feel like a mistake to me. The universe, it seemed, wasn't done playing with my heart. Because against every instinct, I agreed to meet her again. Just for closure, I told myself. Just to move on. But closure has a funny way of turning into coffee dates that last 3 hours. Into long walks where laughter replaces old pain. Into her hand brushing mine again and again, until one day it doesn't pull away. And just like that, the girl who used to make me feel small began to make me feel seen. It wasn't easy. It wasn't clean. There were nights when the ghosts of high school came back, the whispers, The humiliation, the tears. Sometimes I'd wake up from dreams where she was still the bully, and I was still that scared girl clutching my books to my chest. And she'd hold me, whispering apologies I didn't even know I needed. "I can't change what I did," she said once, her voice cracking, "but I want to be someone better for you." And I believed her. God help me, I did. Because love doesn't always come wrapped in kindness. Sometimes it crawls out of old wounds, raw and trembling, asking for another chance. That was the thing about Samantha, she didn't just show up in my life. She wrecked it, rebuilt it, and somehow made it her home. But as our hearts began to knit together, the world outside wasn't ready to understand us. My parents didn't approve. Her friends whispered. And when an old photo from our high school days resurfaced online, one where she was sneering at me in the hallway, it tore open everything we tried to heal. The internet did what it always does best, it judged. Suddenly, we were headlines in a local gossip feed. Ex-bully dates her former victim, toxic or true love? I remember throwing my phone across the room. "They don't know us," I whispered, but my voice broke anyway. Samantha showed up that night, drenched in rain, eyes red from crying. "I'll fix this," she said. But how do you fix the past when the world refuses to forget? The rain didn't stop that night. It slammed against the windows like it wanted to drown the world, or maybe just wash it clean. Samantha stood in my doorway, soaked to the bone. Mascara streaked down her cheeks, clutching her phone like it was the last piece of herself she had left. "Come in," I said softly. She hesitated. "Lena, just come in," I repeated. She stepped inside, dripping water all over the hardwood floor. For a second, we just stood there in silence, the sound of the storm filling the space between us. I could smell her perfume beneath the rain, that same faint scent of jasmine and smoke that always seemed to follow her. "I tried to take it down," she said finally. "The posts, the comments. But it's everywhere now. People won't stop talking." I nodded. "They never do." Her voice broke. "I thought I could protect you this time. I thought if I just—" "You can't fix everything, Sam." She winced when I said her name like that. Not Samantha. Sam. The name I only used when I let my guard down. The name that meant she mattered. She looked at me, eyes glistening. "I don't know how to make this right, Lena. Tell me what to do." I could have told her to leave, to stop making things harder than they already were. But instead I walked over, took her trembling hands and whispered, "Stay." That night we didn't talk about the post, or high school, or the weight of other people's opinions. We just lay there, wrapped up in the sound of the rain and the quiet rhythm of our breathing. Her head rested on my shoulder, her fingers drawing small circles on my skin, not possessive, just present. "I don't deserve you," she murmured against my collarbone. "Maybe not," I said with a half smile. "But you're trying. That's more than most." She laughed softly, the sound fragile but real. "You always were better than me." "No," I said. "Just luckier to have survived you." It was meant as a joke, but the pain in her eyes told me she didn't take it that way. She sat up, her voice trembling. "Do you still hate me?" I looked at her, really looked at her, and I realized something terrifying. I don't know if I ever really did. In the weeks that followed, we tried to live quietly. I deleted my social media. She turned her phone off for days at a time. We spent afternoons cooking together, watching old movies, taking long drives with no destination. For the first time, life felt still. But peace has a way of feeling temporary when you've spent most of your life waiting for the next storm. One evening, we were sitting on my balcony watching the sunset bleed into the skyline when she said, "You know, I used to follow you after school." I turned to her, startled. "What?" "I'd walk behind you. Make sure no one else bothered you." "Sam," she smiled sadly. "I know it sounds insane. I torment you during the day, and then feel sick about it at night. I'd see you sitting alone reading and I'd think, God, she's so brave. But then I'd show up the next morning and make my life miserable again." I finished. She nodded, eyes glistening. "Because I couldn't admit why I cared." That silence between us stretched, not awkward, but heavy with understanding. "Were you?" I started, then hesitated. "Gay," she said, smiling through her tears. "Yeah, I just didn't know it then. Or maybe I did, and that's what scared me most." The confession hung there, raw and unguarded. And for the first time, I realized that maybe she hadn't been my enemy, just another girl fighting her own war in silence. But love stories built on broken foundations have cracks, no matter how much you try to fill them. One afternoon, she got a call from her mother, the kind of woman who measured success by the weight of her diamond rings and the tone of her daughter's reputation. I overheard the conversation from the kitchen. "You're embarrassing this family, Samantha," her mother snapped through the speaker. "Do you have any idea what people are saying?" "I don't care what they're saying." "Well, I do. You think this thing with her will last? You think the world will take you seriously when you're playing pretend with another woman?" Samantha's voice cracked. "It's not pretend." There was a pause, then the sound of something breaking, her mother's voice going cold as ice. "Then you're not the daughter I raised." The line went dead. Samantha stood there, phone still pressed to her ear, eyes wide and empty. And in that moment I saw her walls crumble again. She didn't cry at first. She just stood there, shaking like someone who'd just been told gravity no longer existed. I walked over and wrapped my arms around her, holding her so tightly she couldn't fall apart. But she did anyway. Tears spilled down her cheeks, soaking my shirt. "Why is it so hard to just love someone?" she whispered. I didn't have an answer, because I was starting to feel the cracks too, the fear, the judgment, the whispers every time someone saw us together. We were two women trying to rewrite a story the world didn't want to read. That night she didn't sleep. I woke up to find her sitting on the edge of the bed, staring out the window at the city lights. "I think I need to go," she said quietly. My stomach dropped. "Go where?" "Back home. I need to fix things. With her. With myself. I don't want you to get caught in this mess." "Sam, no. You don't have to fix this alone," she shook her head. "You deserve peace, Lena. Not more chaos." I wanted to argue, to tell her that leaving wasn't the answer, but the look in her eyes stopped me. It wasn't fear I saw there. It was guilt. So I just whispered, "Promise you'll come back?" She smiled, a soft, broken thing. "If you'll still have me." And then she kissed me, slow, desperate, final. The kind of kiss that felt like a goodbye wrapped in hope. Weeks passed. Her texts grew shorter, then stopped. I tried to keep busy, extra shifts at the cafe, long walks, late nights staring at the ceiling, pretending I wasn't counting the days. People said time heals everything, but time only made the silence louder. Sometimes I'd see her name pop up in old photos or mutual friends' posts, and it felt like being punched in the chest. She looked fine, smiling, glowing even, but I knew her well enough to know that smiles can lie. One night I got a letter, an actual handwritten letter, folded neatly in a small white envelope with her handwriting scrawled across the front. I stared at it for hours before opening it. "Lena, I don't know how to start this. I thought I'd be gone a week. It's been a month. My mother still won't talk to me, but I've stopped trying to make her understand. Maybe some people never will. I've been going to therapy. I'm trying to forgive myself for the things I did to you, for all the ways I hurt you before I even knew how to love you. You once told me that love should make you feel safe. I didn't understand what that meant until I lost it. If you still want me, the real me, I'll come home. But if you've moved on, I'll understand. Always yours, Sam." I read it 3 times and still my hands wouldn't stop shaking. The next morning I drove. I didn't even think about it. I just got in my car and drove 6 hours straight to her hometown in upstate New York. It was freezing when I got there, the kind of cold that makes your breath visible and your heart ache. I found her outside a small bookstore wearing a heavy coat, her hair pulled into a messy bun. She looked different, softer, quieter, but when she turned and saw me, her eyes lit up like the first sunrise after a storm. "Lena," she breathed, stepping forward. "You came." "Of course I did," I said. "You didn't think you could get rid of me that easily, did you?" She laughed, that same laugh I fell in love with, unguarded and warm. And then, without another word, I kissed her. Right there in the cold, in front of strangers who might never understand. She pulled back, her forehead resting against mine. "I thought you'd moved on." "Maybe I tried," I whispered. "But some people are worth trying again for." After that, things didn't magically get easier. Love never works like that. We went to therapy together. She rebuilt her relationship with her mother slowly, painfully. I started writing again, something I'd stopped doing years ago. We fought, we cried, we healed. But through it all, we stayed. There were days when the past still hurt, when the shadows of who we used to be crept into the room. But then she'd reach for my hand, or I'd catch her smiling across the breakfast table, and the pain would fade into something softer like memory instead of scar. One evening, months later, we were sitting on that same balcony again, watching the sunset turn the sky to gold. "Do you ever think about who we used to be?" I asked. "All the time," she said. "But I don't hate that version of us anymore. I think they were just lost. And somehow they found each other anyway." I smiled. "We were a mess. The best kind," she said, kissing my shoulder. Later that night, as the city hummed softly below us, she whispered, "You know, if someone had told me in high school that I'd end up madly in love with the girl I used to bully, I would have laughed in their face." I laughed too. "And if someone had told me I'd forgive her, I'd have punched them." She grinned. "Guess we both surprised ourselves." "Guess so," I said, resting my head against her. And for the first time, I realized the truth that love isn't about rewriting the past. It's about choosing to stay, even when the world still remembers who you were. And that somehow was enough. The next few months felt like waking up in a different world, one that finally let us breathe. Not perfectly, just enough. Samantha and I moved into a small apartment overlooking the Hudson. It wasn't fancy, but it had sunlight and plants and laughter echoing off the walls. There was a dent in the couch from where she always sat, and the kitchen window that never closed right, but it was ours. We built a life out of small things. Grocery lists on sticky notes, burnt pancakes, midnight walks, shared playlists, and the quiet certainty that somehow, against all odds, we had made it here together. Sometimes I'd catch her looking at me not the way people look at someone they love, but the way they look at something they still can't believe they deserve. And every time I'd touch her cheek and whisper, "You do." Her career took off faster than either of us expected. She started volunteering at an LGBTQ youth center, telling her story, our story, to teens who were scared, angry, or lost. Watching her speak, watching the way she turned her pain into something that could heal others, made me realize she was stronger than the girl who once hid behind cruelty. After one of her talks, a young girl came up to her crying and said, "You made me feel like it's okay to be myself." That night, Samantha cried in the car. "I don't think I've ever heard anything that beautiful," she said, voice trembling. I smiled. "Maybe that's because for the first time, you're not hiding behind anything." She squeezed my hand. "I'm not. Not anymore." My parents took longer to come around. They were polite, distant, cautious, as if love could be contagious. But time softens even the sharpest edges. One Sunday afternoon, my mom called and asked if we'd like to come over for dinner. I almost dropped the phone. Samantha looked terrified. "You sure about this?" "No," I said honestly. "But we can't keep running from the people who made us." That evening, the air around the dinner table felt like glass, fragile, transparent, ready to shatter. My father cleared his throat twice before saying anything. My mother just kept refilling the salad bowl like she could hide in it. Then out of nowhere, my dad said, "You make her smile." Samantha blinked. "Sir." He looked at me, then back at her. "Lena, you make her smile again." We hadn't seen that in a while. My mom reached across the table and placed her hand over mine. Her voice was soft, trembling. "I just don't want her to get hurt." Samantha nodded, eyes wet. "Neither do I, ma'am. I've done enough of that for a lifetime." It was quiet after that, but not cold. Just beginning. We drove home that night in silence, city lights flickering through the windshield. Then Samantha whispered, "You think they'll ever really accept me?" "They already started to," I said. "That's more than I expected." She smiled. "You always were better at hope than me. Someone has to be." That winter, the city felt alive again. We celebrated our first Christmas together, decorating a crooked little tree that leaned to one side like it was drunk. She insisted on putting up colored lights, even though I wanted white ones. "Too classy," she said with a laugh. "Let's make it weird and bright like us." We spent Christmas Eve wrapped in a blanket, watching snow fall through the window. At one point, she turned to me and said, "You ever think about the first night we met again? You mean the night you ruined my sleep schedule forever?" She grinned. "The very one." I laughed. "Yeah, I think about it more than I probably should." "Do you ever regret it?" she asked quietly. I looked at her, the girl who had once been my worst nightmare and had somehow become my home. "Not for a second." She leaned in and kissed me soft, steady, unhurried. The kind of kiss that didn't need words because the silence said everything. A year later she proposed. It wasn't grand or dramatic. There were no cameras, no crowds, no fireworks. Just a rainy afternoon, the smell of coffee, and a simple ring she'd made herself, a thin band of silver with a small engraving inside. "I'm sorry, I love you, I'm home." She knelt down in our living room, hands shaking. "You once said love should make you feel safe," she said. "I spent half my life making you afraid. I don't ever want to do that again. So, Lena Carter, will you let me keep learning how to love you right?" My heart cracked open in the best way. I didn't even let her finish before saying yes. We both cried, laughed, and kissed until the world blurred into nothing but warmth and light. The wedding was small, just friends, a few family members, and a sunset over the river. My father walked me down the aisle. My mother cried through the entire ceremony. When the officiant said, "You may kiss the bride," Sam whispered, "We've done this before." "Yeah," I whispered back. "But this time we do it right." And as we kissed, surrounded by the people who once doubted us, I realized that forgiveness wasn't a single moment. It was a lifetime of choosing love over fear. Years passed. Our apartment became a home filled with plants that refused to die, art projects that went unfinished, and a cat named Olive who hated everyone except Sam. We fought sometimes, of course, about dishes, about schedules, about stupid things like who left the milk out. But underneath it all, there was always the quiet understanding that we'd survived worse. Sometimes, when the nights were too quiet, she'd hold me and whisper, "Do you ever think about who we were back then?" "Yeah," I'd say. "But I think they'd be proud of us." On our 5th anniversary, we went back to our old high school. The building looked smaller than I remembered, the lockers dull, the hallways shorter, the ghosts quieter. We walked hand in hand down the same corridor where she used to trip me. I could almost hear the echoes of laughter, the sound of my books hitting the floor. "This place feels haunted," I joked. She smiled. "Maybe it is. But we're the ones who came back to set it free." We ended up on the bleachers behind the gym, where the world seemed far away. The air smelled like rain and old grass. "I used to sit here after practice," she said. "I'd see you walking home and wonder what it would be like to talk to you without pretending." I turned to her. "And now?" She looked at me, her eyes soft and certain. "Now I don't have to wonder." Later, as the sun set behind the football field, she rested her head on my shoulder and said, "You know what I realized?" "What?" "That every bad thing I ever did, every cruel word, every mistake, it led me here. To this exact moment. With you." I smiled. "That's one way to justify your crimes." She laughed. "Guess I should thank my teenage stupidity." I nudged her gently. "I already forgave her. You should too." She fell quiet for a long time. Then she said, almost to herself, "Maybe I just did." That night, we went home and danced in our living room. No music, no reason. Just the rhythm of two people who had finally stopped running. Her hands rested on my waist, mine tangled in her hair. The world could have ended outside that window, and we wouldn't have noticed. I whispered against her ear, "I love you." She smiled. "I know. But say it again anyway. I love you." "Good," she said softly. "I never get tired of hearing it." Years later, long after the headlines had faded and the world had moved on, our story found its way into a book. I wrote it, every painful, beautiful piece of it. The bullying, the regret, the night that changed everything. I changed the names, of course, but everyone who mattered knew. When it was published, people called it a love story about forgiveness. Some cried. Some criticized. Some said it was too sad, too unrealistic. But others sent letters saying it gave them hope. Samantha framed the first copy and hung it in our living room. Underneath it, she wrote in black marker, "We were real." One spring evening years later, we sat on the balcony watching the sky fade into orange and pink. She had a few gray hairs now, and laugh lines that made her look even more beautiful. "Do you ever think about the first night again?" she asked softly. I smiled. "Sometimes. Mostly when I want to remind myself how far we've come." She leaned her head on my shoulder. "I still can't believe you forgave me." "I didn't do it all at once," I said. "It happened slowly every time you chose to stay." She looked at me, her eyes filled with the same warmth they always had. "And I'll keep choosing you. Every day. Even when it's hard." We sat there for a long time, saying nothing, just listening to the hum of the city and the heartbeat of something that had taken years to build. I thought about the girl I used to be, quiet, scared, invisible, and how she'd never believe this was her life now. That the girl who once made her cry would one day be the same one to wipe her tears away. It was strange, beautiful, and perfectly imperfect. Because love isn't about finding the person who never hurt you. It's about finding the one who helps you heal and stays to make sure the scars become stories instead of wounds. When the night finally settled, Samantha whispered, "Hey, remember that promise I made you the morning after that first night?" I frowned. "Which one?" She smiled. "That I'd make it up to you somehow." I laughed. "Yeah, I think you did, Sam." She kissed my forehead, her lips warm against my skin. "Then I can finally stop trying." "Don't you dare," I whispered. "Trying is half the fun." She laughed softly, and in that sound, that simple, familiar melody, I heard everything we'd ever been. Later, when we went to bed, she wrapped her arms around me and whispered, "Good night, my favorite mistake." And I said, "Good night, my second chance." Outside, the city kept breathing, the world kept turning, and two women who once hated each other slept in the same bed, not because the past was gone, but because love had made peace with it. And that, in the end, was everything. Thank you for listening. Like and subscribe to get notifications about next videos.